In an earlier episode of this video blog series for the KTH Center for a Sustainable Built Environment, we talked with Erik Stenberg, an architect and researcher at KTH, about his research into renovation of a huge stock of housing in Sweden built during the Million Program era of the 1960s and 70s. In this episode, we talk with Erik Stenberg again about how 50 years of societal changes are driving the need to upgrade and modernize the nation's Million Program areas.
The biggest change that's happened since the 70s, 60s and 70s when these buildings were built is that Sweden has become globalized. So we're a more multicultural and also socioeconomically more spread out society. There's more segregation and more poverty. And unfortunately, those two issues are often linked. So in the more immigrant-based communities, you have a higher rate of poverty. And unfortunately, you have some of the poorest people living in the apartments from the 60s and 70s were intended for the rising middle class. And why I say unfortunately is that they haven't been adapted to the current society. So you have a globalized group of families living in apartments meant for the Swedish post-war nuclear family with 2.7 kids and a red cottage. And that doesn't exist anymore.
Is there anything about your research that's of value to planners or researchers in other countries, or is this purely focused on the Swedish situation?
Well, I think there's lots to learn internationally. Both we can learn a lot about social processes with the globalization issues and segregation and demographics from other countries, but we can also teach in terms of a systems perspective and in terms of the high class of building structures how to regenerate and to reinvent the welfare state in multifamily housing areas.
Are you getting good support from the political system, from the cities and the national government in Sweden?
Well, currently, yes. I think there's an interest from the national government. 15 years ago, no. It was a completely local issue. But it's escalated, and now the Minister of Housing speaks of investments specifically for the Million Program areas. We have yet to see how that type of investment will play out.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen or do you expect to see your research actually leading to different policy decisions?
Yes, in a way the center's research is already affecting policy, not my personal specific, but what I'm involved in. We are already changing the way that the Million Program era was considered as something negative and not full of potential, but that has now changed.
Where do you expect your research to be in coming years?
Well, I expect to be on a national level even more deeply engaged in policy and primarily with municipal housing companies and private owners who are in the renovation process, affecting their methods and also their specific technologies. So to adjust yesterday's apartments to today's society is one of the major challenges. And so we're doing research, for example, into kitchens. We're doing research into apartment sizes, rent levels, structural systems, how they benefit one type of change, all the way up to macroeconomics on a government level, what type of subsidies need to be implemented in order to make an affordable physical change in the housing areas.
How do you go about conducting research like this in practical terms?
Well, of course, it's making connections between lots of different researchers, because the traditional research is specifically investigated within maybe a building material or an economic process or a social issue or an architectural standpoint or a historical value. But now we have to link all of those to larger multidisciplinary groups in order to push the research ahead.
So it cuts across a lot of different disciplines, from, say, materials science and economics, I can hear in that, and of course urban planning. And your research then is pulling together these different elements and finding the parts that fit together to provide an answer to a question?
I think I hold one key to the question, and that is within the architectural historical research. And then my role at the center is to pull together the various groups and to initiate new, broader projects and research fields.
Are you happy with what the center provides you in terms of contacts and resources?
Yeah, it's fantastic to finally to cut across the different departments of KTH and to make a contribution to the development of the built environment.
All right, Erik Stenberg, thanks a lot for being with us.